Through more than 2 decades at Kenner and Hasbro, Aaron built worlds, told stories, and designed toys for some of pop culture's biggest names, including Transformers, Batman, Star Wars, and more. Join him as he explores the archives and tells you the stories of the creative process behind your favorite toys. This is the Toy Armada with your host, Aaron Archer.
So we are back again with another Toy Armada with Aaron Archer, and I'm your host, Protoman. And today we are going to be diving into some of the specifics of the Transformers Energon line. We figured we'd target some fan-voted characters. We took a quick poll during one of Aaron's live streams of some Energon toys that we would deep dive into and kind of cover their history. And we got 2 that we're going to be talking about today. But before that, Aaron, how you doing?
I'm doing great today. How about yourself?
I'm always fantastic. So, the 2 we're going to be covering today, we're going to kind of start at the beginning of the Transformers Energon line in 2004. And these were 2 items that came out during the first 2 waves of the line. I want to say like January 2004 up to about March. And it's that of the Transformers Energon Mega Class Ironhide and what was called at the time the Command Class Scorponok. Not Commander, to be confused with our modern listeners, but Command Class. This was the wild time where price points were all kinds of names. So we're going to start first with the Energon Mega Class Ironhide. That was an Eric Siebeneller design along with Takashi Kuniharu-san from Takara Tomy. Originally was called Roadbuster in the Superlink version. Superlink was what Energon was called in Japan. Debuted December 2003, and then, of course, later in February of 2004 was when it debuted as Ironhide in America. Now, this was a unique design, a unique size, and the purpose of the character in the show was kind of supposed to be the surrogate audience robot character, the Bumblebee, the Hot Rod, the wheelies before that, the Hot Shots afterwards. And this would be the next one of that. What do you remember about this character and his early designs and choices and everything?
Well, the biggest thing I recall was that he would be the first of that price point that did the combining, right?
Yeah.
And we were probably still trying to figure out the electronics package, the character, and the combining all at the same time, which made these first 2 or 3, I guess I'll throw Beachcomber in there as an example of his partner in the assortment. But we were trying to figure that out. We had done a lot of work on the deluxe ones, not as much on these
Mega.
What were these?
Yeah, Mega.
So that's what I recall. And what I recall, too, is, decisions that we made to have the big electronics package / weapon on the roof instead of embedded in the product, because that's where we needed to put the combo action. So when I talk a lot about spring-loaded features and needing room to do all that stuff, in this case we put a lot of that on the outboard part of the vehicle on the top, so that the transformation options were still there within the robot mode. So we were figuring those things out. This is kind of less fun character design stuff and more practical price point and feature set and communication type product design.
Well, and like you mentioned, like anyone who's messed with this figure, that whole electronic element is completely independent of the figure. It's almost as if it's an accessory. It just so happens to have his head attached to it, So where like if you kind of took apart the toy, it's like that whole top assembly could almost come off, independent of, and like you said, the transformation. So it's one of those few times where an electronic box doesn't get in the way of all the other shifting and spacing, for lack of better words. And
but you're right, but it creates other issues, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, well, I'll get into how this wasn't a very popular item. I just wanted to mention that, interestingly enough, the Japanese version, which actually released first, didn't feature the electronics, while the U.S. version did. And I'm kind of curious how that is for the timeline of it, because, when you look at the sculpting of even the Japanese version, it does have, those holes for the speaker, the sound gaps. And it's something where I'm going to assume this figure was designed with the intent of electronics, and for whatever reason, even though Japan was going to get it first, they decided to opt out of having that for, I guess, costing.
Yeah, that was certainly something that was a little more important to the Hasbro side of things. We're still coming off Armada. We're still in a kid toy world where we think that electronics are an attractive reason to purchase products. Not just the transformation alone, but it also does other things. That would be phased out over the coming years, but here you can see this. It's almost a transitional time where we're still trying to serve that young kid with the electronics for our market. You could strip all that out, not pay for the wires, the battery contacts, the speaker, and maybe lights. I don't know if there were lights in that. But,
No, not that one, no.
And Takara could just save all that cost for a character that maybe they weren't going to put too much feature on in their market. I don't remember how he was activated in that market, but if they could save several dollars in the final purchase price at retail, that is probably what they did.
And speaking of price, Ironhide, his MSRP back in 2004 was that mega class price point at $19.99, so $20. Oh, how inflation has changed the world. History has documented that, and I do remember this firsthand, that Ironhide actually sold quite poorly and shelf warmed for 2 to 3 years after his release. Why do you think that is? Maybe because it was a weird, a weird shape. It didn't connect with the audience.
It's a combo. I think it was a combo of things. The show. Let's just start with the show overall. Wasn't, even if you like the show, I'm not even going to get into the quality of the show.
Yeah.
But it was still airing at like 6 a.m. on Cartoon Network, so it was already at a disadvantage. So it wasn't a character people knew from Armada per se, right? If they had been with RID or any of these things going into Energon. So a little bit of character recognition. I think he is a bit of a awkward presentation in package.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
I think all those kind of trucks, Red Alert falls into this as well, that are just boxy. Ratchet from the movie. They just don't always look good in package. And then when you have this elaborate gun system thing that you don't really see in real life on the top there, I just think it wasn't an easy pickup. I think it had I think it got like C pluses across the board, but you add all that up and there's going to be so many other better options to pick up at the store retail that this guy was always the one that didn't get picked up. And for me, he's a little boxy. Maybe if we were in an era where the robot form was packed out, it may have been more successful.
That's something I was going to actually ask. I was like, with the modern era now, with Hasbro, we see almost across the board robot modes being the feature in packaging, where it's something where I imagine this guy probably would have sold better I think so. If the robot mode was predominantly on display. He's got
a strong robot mode.
Yeah, it's something where, well, especially considering it's quite, unfold and large, and it gets across that this is a powerful character as a result of that. Look, red and blues, that's Optimus Prime's colors, so if it works for Optimus, it should work in theory with this character,
Yep.
So, but it clearly didn't for whatever reason. I mean, according to, again, I kind of did a little research beforehand. I was asking some of my Japanese friends why this character wasn't well received in Japan. And they mentioned here one primary reason why Roadbuster, which he was called in Japan, Roadbuster, was not well received in Japan was Japanese audiences were not kind to the choice of voice actor Misoo Iwata, who was his voice actor, which was apparently associated with nerdy, dorky sidekick characters. Sure. And then when I did the research, I was like, oh, okay, I think I know what they're talking about here, because kind of bleeds into some of the stuff I enjoy also. Because the character of Roadbuster Ironhide was voiced by, again, Misoo Iwata, who in the anime community is known for like characters like Itsuki from Initial D, who's this really dorky, almost like high-strung, stressed-out character. And that kind of came across with how he was in the show. The English dub didn't do it any justice either, in my opinion. No offense to Matt Hill, but you know, you have what you could work with an English dub. But wasn't a well-received character. As a character, unfortunately, Toy didn't sell very well. And you could kind of see Hasbro and Takara's initial reaction to that, because so it's September of 2004 in Japan, and in the holiday season of 2004 in the USA, the Ironhide mold gets its only repaint outside of the Japanese to USA variation of the first version. It gets the Energon Ironhide, which is now a green repaint, and it's called Roadbuster Wild in Japan. According to Joe Kide, who did some of the coloring and stuff, this was a G1 Hound homage, and even has G1 Hound star emblem that the G184 Autobot had, and that's what they were kind of going with. And then after that release, that was it for ever touching that mold ever again from Hasbro, which, you know, when Hasbro's notorious for tons of repaints and they completely abandon something, yeah, that sometimes actions speak louder than words, you know?
Yeah, so, I think you can also add in the combo feature not resonating overall, and it's built into the toy. So a lot of these Energon items, certainly on the Autobot side, if you don't have a partner, if you don't sell them in 2-packs, like you were never going to redeco these things because you couldn't activate that feature going forward. So it made them really bad for redeco options in other places, right? Like the convention exclusives or universe type lines or filler stuff. Like they never really got a good second look because of that built-in combo feature that was not going to be probably able to be played out.
Yeah, and while in the past some other Energon product did get convention exclusive repaints that did have the combiner factor in it, a good example being Tow Line, that Van saw being used as Ratchet and Ironhide and stuff like that through BotCon. That's the first one that comes to mind. I'm sure there's others, but it's something where clearly Hasbro's just like, yeah, we're done with this. You know, like this one. It again, the fact that it didn't sell well in its first wave release, and then of course they were.
Well, and I also like to bring these things up because it does matter. It's subtle. It's hard to see on the outside ever, but these first wave items they go two ways. They can be overdeveloped because you had plenty of time to push and pull and make sure you put out the perfect item like some of the Armada guys, or you have to hit that first wave and you're figuring out the features and the scale and the different stuff, and you have to put something out, and sometimes those first wave items can suffer, right? I think if I look at the second iteration of this price point, right? Is that the bulkhead? And
you have the bulkhead, which is the helicopter, and then you get into, I guess he was called
Landmine.
Yeah, Landmine, which was that combiner vehicle there, the orange one. So yeah.
So if we compare the play features of the same assortment, essentially, we clearly said, okay, this bigger scale of combining like the deluxes probably isn't the best way to go about it, but how can we make an ultimate combining type figure? And Eric made much better product decisions on those two items, Landmine and Bulkhead, than the time we had at the time to figure out the first waves. And so that's an example of toy development. You know, you do your best and you think you figured it out, you hit your schedule, But then, like, you keep refining and you keep going, something could be better here, or, oh, that's not working, well, let's not keep doing that. And you end up with those two items, which I find to be some of the strongest items in the Unicron trilogy.
Especially the landmine. It's very...
yeah, landmine is special.
A lot of people enjoy that. And again, that was a mold that did see convention use. It was, I believe, Landshark was his name. They repainted him into that. And then, of course, he got the other repaints within Energon. So, yeah, those are ones that did resonate with fans. There's a lot... For people could say what they want about Energon as a piece of fiction, but a lot of really good tools and designs and molds came at that. And I constantly say this. The whole line was the prototype to what would be classics later on. The vibe, anyhow, where it's like it's taking...
Well, we were certainly had been exposed to the fan conventions at this point, and the boards, and understanding the vibrant community that exists, and that there's certainly love for certain characters over others. And so Energon is where we started to do more sprinkling in of all that stuff that you're noticing there. Absolutely.
Well, it's to kind of like simplify it. It's taking classic characters and giving them kind of a modern interpretation. Like you could look at the Rodimus, you could look at the Inferno. You know, those are like, it's taking that classic fire truck and giving it a different spin. Taking that, you know, that well, in the case of the Rodimus, you know, a flame-covered truck and giving it a modern spin. And even looking at stuff like maybe even say the Wing Saber, if we ever get around to him, it's, you know, taking Star Saber and giving it a modern spin. So, and then, of course, the combiners, and I could go on and on. Speaking of that, we'll get into our next one here, because we're pretty much, you know, there's not much to really say about Ironhide. It was kind of...
well, yeah, and that, again, that's an Eric Siebenaler design, and he worked with Takara on that to make it as good as it could be. You know, again, we're not crapping on any of these toys, but they don't always find sales success, even if under the best of conditions. And this one was working uphill a little bit, given the time constraints we were dealing with. I don't know. So I don't make apologies, but certainly early days, and Eric did pretty good with it regardless.
I think that was a growing...
The weird thing about it, too, the one weird thing, let's talk about it, is that head kind of on the roof of the car. Yeah. Right? It's a little... That's a little... Anytime that stuff happens on Transformers, it's a little weird.
It's always one that, you know, people always want to have with Transformers, that when they're in vehicle mode, there's no sign that this thing turns into something. Yeah. And that kind of is like the unwritten rule that's like, yeah, well, this clearly has a head on the roof. This turns into something.
So I don't know. Maybe that made it a little zany or less realistic, or could have been a factor. I've never been a fan of it necessarily, because it's just sitting there, you know, kind of like Smokescreen and Armada a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, when those things are exposed, it's just not. It does break the magic.
So next one we're going to be covering is one of the more well-received ones. We have here Transformers Energon Command Class, which is kind of what it was kind of born out of what was the Ultra Class before that. Command Class Scorponok. In Japan, aka Superlink, it was known as Megazarek, which is what Scorponok historically was called in that region up until 1987 when that started. This is a Aaron Archer design along with Shogo Hasui, and had some minor after details that were given by Hirofumi Ishigawa, who did some of those little extra details. He was the one who was like, hey, you should probably put that G1 Scorponok visor on the head and stuff like that. So this one here debuted also, again, in Japan, Wave 1, 2004, February. Had two different versions. Had the orange version for America, had the more gold kind of trimming version for the Japanese one. And what an interesting one, because it's technically a triple changer. And it's, again, like we said before, like an update of a classic character. Because up to that point, the Scorponok name was associated with like a Beast Wars character, which was clearly not invoking that giant city former. Where this one here, it's got the visor like the city former. It pretty much has the same transformation even, But then it also has this like flight mode here, which interestingly enough, it says here, designer Aaron Archer during one of his Orson Worlds posts described this third mode as the Sand Hoverjet. So, what I don't know who Aaron is, but yeah, sure. So what's the story with this guy? Like, especially from a like design standpoint, like what were the goals with this guy?
Well, I think this guy came out of the Terracons, being bugs and stuff like that, lizards and bugs, and so I don't know if he ended up being the captain of the Omnicons or the Terracons, rather.
He's kind of like, the leader of them, yeah.
So he had kind of a form that was in concert with those. Definitely this is one where we were certainly trying to make the robot closer to the previous generation one, I guess we would call that. Scorponok. But also we were living in that weird space where we wanted it to be a vehicle, so it definitely looks like it's a construction vehicle in the form of a scorpion, versus a bug-like scorpion. So a little bit of navigation with that. The play feature with the Decepticons and Energon was the either a triple change or a weapon reveal kind of thing. So he fits into that. I started it. Eric worked on this one as well. What we're going to end up talking about as we go is Energon is a lot of Eric and I crashing on figures because we were late. We were doing all the Armada, and that never stops, right? And then you're developing the next thing at the same time. And at that point, we started really just pushing the paper back and forth as we just needed to get this stuff done. So I remember doing some stuff and making some detail notes and different things, and then those shoulders are certainly Eric's shoulders, but the feet and the hands might be closer to something I would have done. The torso is a little more Eric, the head is a little more me, and looking at G1. I'm probably the one that was pushing for the sand hover jet mode. So, it's kind of how toy design goes. It's not an artistic endeavor. It's a process execution, right, to get the job done. Like making a car, one person doesn't make a car or assemble anything. So Eric and I started working that way a lot, and I remember this character in particular being one of those. And I was just happy to bring back that kind of character, and I like this silhouette. I like this kind of wide, squatty, long-armed. Those are nice legs.
It's a very powerful design. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that way. Yeah, it's pretty strong. The shoulders on the shoulder pivot's a little weird, but it is what it is. And the scorpion foot mode is pretty cool. It's got those opening claws with the weapons inside of them, the projectiles.
And you mentioned that you probably had something to do with that third mode. I'll tell you, looking at it, I'm getting a little bit of your Cybertron Megatron with the Batmobile.
Sure.
Absolutely. I'm totally seeing that now that you mention it.
Designers are like tigers. We can't I can't not draw how I draw.
Yeah.
And so you're definitely going to see some of that stuff come through. I mean, you could put Slug Slinger in there, you could put Double Dealer in that zone, and you're going to be like, and Energon Megatron as well as Cybertron Megatron, and go, oh yeah, I think the same guy touched those.
Oh yeah.
You can start to see those shape theories.
Something that you did mention though, because it's like you have the Scorpion mode, you have this hover jet mode thing. It's trying to be a little bit of the old G1 character. Again, like you said, that construction element. So on the end of that tail, you got a construction hook for clearly was that trying to infuse something extra in there, like visually, like it's such a weird extra element that's put.
Well, we didn't. It can look like a bug, but it can't be a bug.
Okay.
So we were doing our best to bring in, the arms, while they look like, pincher claws. That's a big construction grind.
I see what you mean. Okay.
Bucket, So we were trying to. It's the silhouette of a scorpion, but if you looked at it, it was made by Caterpillar.
Yeah.
That was the idea that we operated under. Now, whether that was successful or not, I don't know. But you could certainly tell it's not a segmented, six-legged, scorpion, more like the Scorponok from Beast Wars. It's not in that mode. It's more in a construction vehicle in the shape of a scorpion mode.
Totally. That's true. So this guy also, he had electronics. He had sounds also. When you mess with his little, I guess we'll call it his stinger there, lets off sounds and everything. Again, named after his G1 namesake, so a lot of the silhouette and the design and the head sculpt kind of invoke that. He had the little visor that went up and down like the original character. So when this guy went into his different regions, he had, again, the American version had more of these oranges on him. The Japanese version had these more kind of gold colors. Oddly enough, the American version was the one that was featured on the show. I don't know if you would know the reasoning for that, if chicken came before the egg or whatever, but that is...
I don't know the particular reasons, but yeah.
That seems to be a common thing. A lot of the show's coloring was more the Western versions than they were the Japanese.
Well, we were responsible for delivering base color. So think of base color as the general layout of the color breaks without worrying about is it red 134 or 184 or 187. That's not. And and then that's where you get the animators will kind of match appropriately within the animation color spectrum to get the best facsimile thereof. Why Takara would have went so radically different, I don't know, because they would have known what was going to be in the cartoon, and Energon actually aired first in their market.
Yeah, well, the toy came out first in their market, the show aired first in their market, but what's even more perplexing, and this was something I only learned today researching this, the trading card included with Scorponok, the Western trading card, because they came with trading cards, all the Energon toys, featured the gold-colored version from the Japanese one, and the art that's featured in the Japanese one features the orange-colored one from the American. I don't know. It's very weird. That's why it's something where I'm like, something got mixed up somewhere, and I don't know what it is. So
yeah, I that's been too long for me to recall the details.
It's just something I wanted to just note for people who are watching. Like, oh, that's a weird, fun fact about it. So this guy afterwards had its original run. Those two versions from East and the West, and then when we go into Seibertron with what was known as Galaxy Force in Japan, but the Seibertron version specifically. You guys did the Dark Scorponok repaint, doing a little bit of that Black Zarek homage color scheme there. So that's pretty cool. A lot of fans appreciated that. It looked really nice. Came out fantastically. And then, of course, Bakon grabbed that mold because they loved it, so they used it twice. In Bakon 2010, we got the Double Punch, which was taking that mold and giving it the garish 90s UKs of the pinks and the baby blues and the hot oranges. And
I got that one on my shelf right now. It's one of my favorites.
Let me ask you something. Is the visor still on it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so at that point, the head sculpt started to degrade a little bit, and that visor sometimes falls off very easily on that one. And so when they did the Bakon 2014 version, recognizing that the head was already starting to break down, this comes from Jesse, who worked on this one here at Bakon. he mentioned that, we started messing with it, and we already started noticing that from the last one we did, and this was 4 years prior, already the head sculpt was starting to not come out well. So they decided to make a brand new head sculpt from the ground up that actually was a transforming headmaster, and did something that 100% brought it back to its origin. And it's the original Scorponok. It has a headmaster. It uses that mold. So we were really going full classics with that one there. So that mold, that was, again, the two that we talked about here today were voted by the fans because fans were curious about their origins and their histories. This Scorponok one was clearly popular with the fans to see 5 different versions across different platforms and stuff. So I know back in the day, buying it brand new from the shelf at Walmart, loved it, thought it was a great figure. Looking at both of mine right now on the shelf, and it was a great one.
Yeah, I'm happy I have the one to look at here. I put him with my Armada Megatron as kind of the two dudes I like having next to each other.
And they're big old dudes. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of tough.
But yeah, and so that's it more or less. We just wanted to cover these two, kind of do much more of a shorter form of this, but we wanted to kind of cover 2 characters. We'll definitely be doing more of these in the future. And again, we are listening to your comments and stuff like that. If there's specific ones you'd like us to talk about next, we do have 2 that we kind of have an idea of who we want to talk about, but definitely leave comments below and let us know who you would like to see also discussed, where we could deep dive into all of these, and Aaron could give the stories and history of some of these characters and everything like that. Because Energon is one of those series it's very divisive with the fans, that one. That's always been a tough one to discuss with fans. It's like the toys are pretty good, but fiction also steers the ship a little bit. So
I think it depends on how you come at the property. If you're a toy-centric person exclusively or primarily, there's a lot of good options. If you're a show person and then you want to pick up the characters that are great from the show, you might not be as matchy and cool that way. But the products are nice. I mean, they're not. I'm not. Energon products are fine. We're just dialing in at that point to figure it all out still.
And not to mention, it doesn't help the fact that also the comic book never saw its ending. That's when Dreamwave went under, so they were like right in the middle of the comic. So if you wanted an alternative,
because Scorponok was cool in the comic.
Yeah, and again, the fiction just ended. It didn't have a conclusion. So that you didn't have an alternative like, the show wasn't that great, but the comic was great. Because Armada had a fantastic comic. Like I will always tell people, you want a good read. I mean, Simon Furman even got on that book at one point. Like the Armada books and how they depict the mini-cons are fantastic. So it's something where, Energon didn't really have that. They had a few issues initially, and then, that was that.
Phased out.
Everything got, suddenly you weren't getting your subscription anymore. But yeah, 2 great figures. Again, let us know what you think about these. The Energon, Ironhide, and the Scorponok. Did you have these growing up? What was your initial thoughts on them? How long was Ironhide sitting on the shelves in your region? And do you want to see any more of these? Is there any specific ones from Energon you'd like to see? Because we're still in 2024. We're almost done 2024, but going into 2025. And we're technically in the 20th anniversary of this brand, so we kind of want to tackle some of these guys and celebrate it proper. So let me know what you think about these. Aaron, thank you again for joining us for the Toy Armada.
No problem. It's great to talk about some Energon, guys.
It's great to have anyone talking about Energon. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you really soon here on the Toy Armada with Aaron Archer. And as always, thank you for listening.